So I was wondering, Taylor, it's like, what's the definition of a podcast? Because like what we're doing here, I kind of think it's in its own kind of unique category because it's not really a podcast. I mean, I think of a podcast as either one guy or like say the three of us sitting around a table, generally in the same room, and you say, and you just kind of go back and forth, and just kind of spar or just sort of discuss or whatever. Like I think it's called the Working Tools podcast. There's one out of, it's like British Columbia and Washington State. And then there's a Masonic Roundtable and all that. Those are more podcasts. This is similar to a lodge meeting in that, I host. We don't open, of course, we don't do the ritual, but I bring in a speaker and we have Q&A. So I took that idea from the Research Lodge. But like, I love doing panel discussions here, which I guess are closer to being a podcast, where it's like, I need to do another one, but I get like 5 or 6 guys to come in. Like, we did one on traditional observance lodges a year or so ago that was awesome because I just picked people. I just was asking, grabbing anyone's like, have you ever been involved with an observant lodge or anything? And I got like 6, 7 brothers to volunteer, and every single one of them had a different experience. One had only attended some, one they converted their lodge into an observant lodge, another one they started one from scratch. And so they all had a totally different perspective on it. And it was just luck of the draw. But that was great because I just do up some questions and kind of interview them. But I love the forum here. It's just sort of like I'm just making it up as I go along, and it seems to work. And I'm serious, it's just totally off the top of my head. I'm like, hey, that'd be cool. I want to do it on this. And I just go do it. I have no idea what I'm doing. Just make it up as I go along. But it's hitting, so it's like I must have been doing it mostly right because it works. But I don't know, it's kind of funny. This whole medium seems new to me, and I'm constantly questioning myself, like, okay, is it working? Can I do more? Can I bring in more people? Am I reaching a larger audience? Do I need to really work on expanding it? I don't know. It just seems like I'm never satisfied. It's really nice what we have, but I feel like I got to keep improving it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Instead of just rolling with it and not be like, okay, it's cool.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the heart of it, right? Is it's learn by doing and constantly adapt is just the way to do it.
Yep.
I like
Otherwise,
the Zoom meeting
struggle.
format.
Yeah.
Yeah, me too.
Okay.
I mean, some podcasts go into the TV studio format.
Right. And that's kind of what I think people think a podcast is.
But then you got the travel ones where they've got a GoPro and they're on a sailboat or snowboarding or whatever, or hiking or.
Right. Oh yeah, that's more of a video selfie kind of thing. Well, I mean, it can be whatever you want. It's like this is a whole new medium. Podcasts are a fairly new medium. They call them vlogs, but that never stuck. Video blogs. Yeah. I remember that word. It died. It didn't.
Well, if you're traveling and want to let your friends know where you are, and you've got the GoPro and that type of thing, yeah, that's a video log. But
right,
that's about it.
Right. I think it's funny. It's funny because with blogs, I have a website that I maintain, and that was the first one I did before I started doing any lodge ones. And there was all of these you could download, or you could sign in to online blogs and show it on your page or whatever. It's like, no, screw that. I'm a programmer. I'm going to make my own. So I sat down and made my own blog software, mainly just to see if I could do it. Like, okay. And it's basically just SharePoint, but I customized it enough that it was blog format because they didn't have anything that really did what I wanted. And I was like really into that, and I was posting regularly. And then I got into Facebook, and I got to where, and Twitter, and I was posting on that I stopped doing my own blog because it was much easier just to go on to Facebook and say something. So it's like, I wish I had kind of kept my own blog up along the way, because it's much easier to search my own stuff, because searching on social media is really hard. Even your own site. Yeah. If you have a lot of content, especially like me, who's always posting something stupid, it's hard to find things. It'd be nice if you could have like categories and things. If you could go into like Facebook and say, okay, I'll put this in the Masonic category and like pin it in some way, And then you can just go somewhere and say, pull up all of my posts for this category and have them right there and sort. I mean, I know you can do it with behind the code they have, but it's sort of like, I don't know, never got the hang of that. But anyway.
Yeah, that's one thing. The Ohio Lodge Research has a document repository. We use Club Express for our website.
Okay.
And it's the file structure there is a little weird. But I was looking through the content itself, and it's really interesting because it's a hodgepodge of like some guy had a bunch of scans of books that he threw up there, or that the lodge had. So there's like your standard stuff, right? Like your Masonry Dissected, a couple of editions of those and things like that. And then some very short blurbs where somebody had like written something maybe for the Beacon, which is Ohio's Masonic magazine. There's like a little, just one file was just like a little like 3 or 4 sentence blurb about some symbol or something, and some random files from like. So there's 3 different papers on there on Martinism, nothing on Rosicrucian or Luke Owens or the Red Strict Observance, but a bunch of old like early 1700s Masonic books. Just the content itself is a little sparse. I kind of want to go through and have a more coherent idea of what's on there and curate really what we have on that page. The only reason I realized that it was there were so many gaps in there is that I was trying to rip all the files off the website for my own archive, because some of the old websites I used to look to at when I was just joining the Masons are gone now, right? And that stuff is lost. I remember the Sanctum Sanctorum had some really cool stuff on there. Now it's just gone.
Yeah, have you tried like the Wayback Machine to bring it up?
I did. I don't think because the Sanctum Sanctorum was had private sections and none of that stuff was there.
Okay. Yeah, the Wayback Machine works except if it's like data driven, like if it's like there's a database behind it storing the data, it's not really there. But if it's just straight up HTML, it's still there because they say they basically captured the HTML pages. But if there was like a database, like if it was a SharePoint site, it's not going to be there because if the website's gone, the database behind it is gone. You might have the front page that's like a kind of a screen grab of the HTML page at the moment, but like you can't dig into anything. So Wayback is cool. It's just it doesn't have everything. But you're right about that. How many people maintain that for the Lodge Research? How many people are actually involved in maintaining it?
Just our secretary, to be honest.
That's it. See, like I'm the single point of failure for Virginia Research Lodge for our website, and the Grand Lodge has been trying for about 3 years to get something up and running that we could use, and they thought about using Grandview. Grandview is. Do you have Grandview? I don't know how.
Yeah, we got it.
Okay,
we have
seems to be catching on. Yeah, it seems to be catching on. It's a good for members, for tracking members, for tracking lodges, and for community. What they're doing with it is useful, and it's centrally located, so you don't have to worry about me quitting Masonry or dying or something. Our website's gone if I'm not there maintaining it. The Grand Lodge will make sure they're paying to keep that thing going, but it seems to be very useful, and secretaries can report through it, and people can pay dues, and you can do announcements. So it's good. It's really not a document archive, and our IT team tried to. Well, it's the Committee on Masonic Education was trying to make Grandview work for a data repository, and that didn't work at all. So
I think you could do minutes, but that's about the extent of it.
It's not really geared for like, storing research papers and which is what they wanted. They told me for years, you need to start putting your stuff in our archive. And I keep telling them, when you build an archive, I'll be happy to put stuff there. But literally, they told me, it's like, the Grandmaster, you have 1 year to get stuff in our archive. I said, okay, in a year, I'll check with you and see if they built anything yet I can put stuff in. but it's kind of hard to comply if you haven't given me any word.
Tulane, Tulane University
Mhm.
did away with the home drives for everybody and have a big account with box.com.
Yeah.
And so when I went over there to do temp work for a couple of years, I wasn't allowed a university account, but I had to get a free account, which has like 10 gig limit, something like that.
Yeah.
And then they gave me permission into certain places to store documents.
Right.
So, that were, department related. They had a kind of a department permissions and, something like that would at least get it off your hard drive.
Right. Right.
Because you can give other people permission into any account.
Yeah. Well, it's been my goal to move us because I've been a SharePoint developer forever. So it's like, well, I know this, so I use it.
Yeah, if you know SharePoint,
website. Yeah, I can do a lot with SharePoint, but I'm working more in the cloud now, and I'm looking about setting up a cloud account for the Research Lodge and move everything there. I mean, like email. I found an email solution, which is good. That one of the guys I know has a thing through Google where you use Google Groups. It's not ideal, but at least somebody else is maintaining it, so I'm not worried about if I'm not there to maintain it. But I want to like the Grand Commandery in Virginia. They had an IT committee that basically built a whole cloud presence for a whole bunch of different things that they want to track for Grand Commandery, and it's good that it's in the cloud. So there's many more capabilities, and I wanted to do that for the Research Lodge. Instead of trying to redesign the face of the website I have, I want to just build something brand new, build a better search tool. There's a lot I wanted to do with it and kind of move in a new direction. I just haven't had time to play with it. And my lovely co-host is not going to be here today, so I'm having to let people in. Oh, it's after 9. Good morning, Bassem. Good morning, Mike. Did I say that right? I always butcher names. I'm sorry.
Perfectly fine. Thank you very much. Good morning.
Good to be here. Where are you coming from?
Montreal.
Montreal. Okay. Mike is still signing in. Mike, how are you doing today? Mike's still looking for his microphone. Mike, turn on your mic, Mike. As always, I never know how many people are going to participate. You put it out on Facebook and people say,
there we are. Good morning.
Hey, good morning, Mike. You put on, let's see, today we have 3 going. So let's see, that's Taylor. Well, okay, Taylor's here. That's good because he's a speaker, and Omar and me, I assume. So yeah, you can. I learned you can't trust. I mean, I put it out on Facebook, but I really can't trust that for who's going to show. But unfortunately, and the reason I had to move it to 9, and let me go and do my formal. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Virginia Research Lodge unstated meeting for August 10th. We're meeting at 9 o'clock this morning because I have a funeral to attend at 11. And it was a good friend of mine, Eric Holloman, who's a member of a lodge in our area. He was the district educational officer when I was worship master about 12 years ago. And he was very active in the lodge and with the Widows Committee, did a lot of work, was all into Masonic education. And he just passed away, and they're having a memorial service. So I have to be there. So I moved this to 9. So I'm going to ask Taylor to keep it under an hour, if you would. So, but normally I would just kind of do more vamping back and forth, but I do want to make sure we have time. I don't want to rush you at all, but normally we could spend like 10, 15 minutes kind of here chatting with everybody beforehand. So, but I want to go ahead and wrap it up shortly after 10 if I can, just so I'm not running late for that thing. But I didn't want to cancel again because both Taylor and Owen had to cancel and reschedule a couple of times in the last couple months. and Owen canceled on me again at the last minute at our last meeting. So I didn't want to push you again. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce. I want to thank everybody for coming. If you're watching this on YouTube, please like and subscribe. Oh yeah, let me do the obligatory notes here. I have. I'm going to put in links in the chat if that would open. Here we have our Facebook group. If you're not already a member of our group, please join our Research Lodge Facebook group. We have our papers there. Our Research Lodge website that I was just talking about, that has all of our papers and some other interesting things. And then a link to our YouTube channel for Unstated Meetings. It's the playlist on YouTube on my channel. And I just updated it, so we are current as of today. All of our Unstated Meetings are up on YouTube. I think we're pushing 60 recordings up there, which is just awesome. So there's a lot of good content. Please check it out. And then my email, if you're not already on our mailing list and you're not on Facebook, there's my email. You can contact me to get on our mailing list. So get all that out of the way. Taylor, I'm going to turn it over to you. Please introduce yourself. You've spoken here before, and you can go. Are you going to be presenting anything today?
Yeah. Yep. I have share my screen.
Yeah, let me go ahead and do that, and then I'll turn it over to you.
All right. Obligatory. Everybody see the presentation?
Yep.
Awesome. All right. So my name is Taylor Kleineick. I am the current Worshipful Master of High Point Lodge 773 in Monroe, Ohio. I am a past master of the Ohio Lodge of Research and a former regent of the Royal Schofield Society. Today's presentation is part of a System of Freemasonry lecture, taking a systems approach to looking at Freemasonry. And today we're going to be talking about network and graph theory and its implications for Freemasonry. There we go. So network and pomegranate. These are two key parts of the pillars of King Solomon's Temple, denoting unity and plenty. It's important to understand that Freemasonry is a type of a social network, and understanding how these networks, and particularly social networks, function, their weaknesses, their strengths, and the way and the shape of the network is really important to understanding the health and vitality of the fraternity. And this isn't something we typically talk about. But when we do have a unified social network, we tend to have a strong fraternity and stronger lodges, and thus pomegranates, the fruit, are plentiful. In a graph theory of social networks and networks in general also helps us kind of elucidate some of the more esoteric aspects of a ritual, but that's not something that we're going to actually talk about today. But these more modern understandings of the world and how it works do help us understand some of the things that they talked about in our rituals, in the old writings. Different language, different analysis sets, but they're analogous and they kind of help us see things that we don't notice before. Oh, sorry, I think I skipped a slide here. And it kind of froze. There we go. So the basics of network graphs, you have two basic components. You have a node, or in some of the languages of different systems, they call it a vertex, and a link, or an edge in those other forms. Nodes represent a unit of the system. For us, it could be individual members, lodges, grand lodges, etc. And computer networks, they are machines, servers, printers, things like that serve as nodes. And links are the relationships to one another. So you can have undirected networks where information can flow any direction. You can have directed networks where information flows only in one direction. And that kind of changes the analysis that goes on. The links can be quantized and give quantitative values, representing their strength or their weakness. This will come into effect later. And all of this can be done quantitatively through matrices and matrix math. So you can actually run analysis on these networks. The next set of basic pieces of a network are describing the relationships between the nodes and the links. So you have paths, which are, a sequence of non-repeated nodes between connecting two nodes. So if we look over here, a path might be from 10 to 1 to 2 to 3, or 10 to 2 to 3. And a distance is the number of nodes in that path. So this is just 1, 2. This is 1, 2, 3. And so you have different path lengths, and that's a good way to judge what you call distance, or even the diameter of a network is how many hops you have to take to go across the network. Each node has a degree, and that's the number of links from a node to a number of direct connections to another node. So for instance, you see 10 over here has exactly 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different nodes connected to it directly, so it has a degree of 5. Those numbers are used for analysis in other parts. Another important part of network graphs are clustering. So it's a measure of the degree to which a node and a graph tends to cluster together. So again, over here, you can see that we have 2 clusters over here, this group 1 and this group over here 2. And there's a bridging connection right here, which we'll kind of talk about the importance of those in a little bit. Another important aspects of graphs in network graphs are centrality. It's how central to the network is any particular node. There's different types of centrality and different ways to judge that. So there's betweenness centrality, which is it's a measure of how many shortest paths go through a node. Basically, how many paths does this node sit between? So for instance, you can see that number 2 over here is part of a different number of paths and has a betweenness metric associated with that. The highest betweenness centrality is actually going to be number 5 over here. Most of the paths that go through this will give it the highest betweenness centrality. You can see that going from anywhere on this side of the map over here has to go through 5 and 3, but 3 has slightly less because you can go around it on this side of the map. The next one is closeness. It's the measure of the average length of all the shortest paths from a node to all other nodes. And if you look at this, again, 3 and 5 have the highest closeness. 2 over here, which the least. And again, that has to do with the average length of all the shortest paths from one node to all the other nodes. So these are just ways to describe the centrality of the node within the network. The last measure is the eigenvector centrality, and this is a measure of how connected a node is to other highly connected nodes. Again, the highest one here is going to be number 3, followed by 2 and 5. Because these nodes are the most connected over here, it's going to have the highest value. The idea is that that number tells you how closely it's connected to other powerful nodes within that network. We'll keep going. There are other ways to look at what players are key, what nodes are key here. And again, if you look at this bridge right here between 3 and 5, if this was disconnected here, you'd have 2 isolated networks, and they wouldn't be able to communicate. And so this bridge right here between 3 and 5 is really important to that network. There are different types and phenomena that occur within different networks. So one of the most important ones is the notion of the small world. This describes networks that are both highly locally clustered and have very short path lengths compared to a random graph, i.e. it's very connected. So random graphs are graphs that the number of connections that are present are randomly assigned based on a probability. This is where graph theory originally started. When they're doing analysis, they would make random connections and just see what properties existed there. So it's very random here compared to a regular graph where every node is connected to another set number of nodes, and here it is 3. In the small world, what you see is that the network is somewhat regular, but you have these bridging connections here. So these help to reduce the path length. So this idea is most commonly seen in the 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon. So if you ever play that game, it's, how many actors does it take to get to Kevin Bacon? Or it's usually connected through various movies. So they might have one person or 2 people who are really highly connected that can connect them to that actor. This is an important phenomenon in Freemasonry, and that it really describes well the fact that in the Masonic world, you might not have a ton of members at your lodge, or not everybody's really highly connected within the fraternity, but there are key people who are extremely well connected and help bridge those gaps. So that if you are out and about and you run into a guy in a lodge halfway across the state, you might recognize him. Or you guys probably have a connection between 1 or 2 people deep. In Ohio, guys like Chad Kopinski, Jim Hall, they are very highly connected, well known, and people usually can make connections through them. And this helps us kind of keep the idea that our fraternity is well connected and strong. And it's important because the strength of weak ties. So earlier we talked about how links could be assigned strengths, so weaker connections and stronger connections. So an easy example is to understand family. So, brothers and sisters are probably going to have stronger bonds than, say, somebody in their 3rd or 4th cousin removed. And those bonds are really important, though. But there's research that suggests that weak ties could actually be more advantageous in politics or in seeking employment than the strong ties, because weak ties allow for an individual to reach a higher number of other individuals. So if we're only looking at strong ties, there's a limit. Most people have friends roughly, we can consider close, between 2 to 5. You can see that over here in the connections through strong ties. But those people have other friends, and your connection to them is quote weaker, but it does allow you to reach a much wider network. And this is actually really important for understanding growth in the fraternity. Weaker relationships play a vital role in helping us reach our goals and make meaningful progress, particularly in things like networking and job searching. This idea really came up in research that was looking at how people find jobs, and they found that you usually don't get it through a close connection, but somebody who has, quote, the weaker ties. So, your barber's friend has a job opening and hear from your barber, and that's how you get a job. Those weak ties are really what drive job acquisition for people. And same thing for things like fraternity, right? The connections between lodge members can be seen as strong ties, and the connections between lodges or members from different lodges might be considered weak ties, but it helps us transmit information across our social network within the fraternity. But when we're particularly looking at generating more membership, we can see that if we're only looking at strong ties and only people who we're really close to already, we're going to have a very small network of people to pull on. It also has some implications later that we'll talk about. Another phenomenon, this is more recent research, is called the scale-free networks. These are where the links between nodes follow a power law. So most connections have most nodes have very few connections, but some connections are hubs and they have tons of connections, right? And this is the hub and spoke model that you see airlines using. There's a few major hubs that the airlines have to, and most of their travel goes through those nodes. And this kind of derives from preferential attachment and a rich get richer scheme. So as a hub grows, the likelihood that more nodes connect to that hub increases. And if you don't have a lot of nodes, it's likely that you're going to not have any more growth. And you can see this in lodges where lodges that are doing really well will tend to keep gaining membership, whereas lodges who are struggling are going to see a decline. And in understanding what drives preferential attachment is really important. Again, I think it has to do with the nature of our connections. And there's all kinds of examples of scale-free networks, and it's important to understand network effects also. So network effects are benefits or hazards associated with a network. So a lot of, let me rephrase this. The more nodes you add to a network, the more value that network has. The obvious example is telephones, right? One telephone is useless. Two telephones is kind of novelty. So we start adding 3 and 4 and 5 and hundreds of thousands of telephones into the telephone system. That telephones actually become very useful, right? They allow you to call people and things like that. Same thing with computers. The more computers you have on a network, the more value that network has. And this is actually really the truth behind a lot of the growth that we see in the early tech sector, where Facebook, MySpace, a lot of these companies, Lyft, we're trying to get more people involved in it because it adds more value to the network for each additional node that you have. There's some other effects too that are important to understand. Networks can be resilient and robust, or they can be fragile. If we go back to that first slide, if you cut that link in between the 3 and 5 node, you have 2 separate networks, and networks can fall apart. And again, with the hub and spoke model, if you take out one of the hubs over here in red, you can basically disassemble the network pretty quickly. This is a tactic that is used in counterterrorism and terrorist networks, that if you can take out the leadership or key players and key connectors, that the network will fall apart. Now, one of the things about social networks is that they tend to have a lot of self-organization, which allows them to be very resilient. So when you take out, a terrorist leader, there's oftentimes somebody who can step up into that role, because the network is self-organized and adapts. Freemasonry should also adopt a similar model of self-adaptation, where if you remove a lodge, it shouldn't cause the whole system to come down. But there's an argument to be made that we're becoming less self-organized, that we're creating less lodges, and that lodges are becoming more stagnant and more controlled in a hierarchy manner. And when networks are in a hierarchy like that, it allows, there benefits the hierarchies, just like in the military. You have command and control structures that are useful in their own aspects, but they don't have the same level of resiliency. So, if a general is in charge of everything, say like Russia and Ukraine, they had their generals on the front line and they get taken out. A lot of people don't know what to do. The American military has taken a self-organized approach where you have an objective and let the people kind of organize how they kind of pursue it. And so when we're looking at Freemasonry, what inevitably comes up is a problem of our membership. So some of the questions that we can ask about network theory and self-application of Freemasonry are, how does our individual members' social network impact fraternity, right? If we are, as individual members, if we have a smaller social network, less weak ties, probably gonna have less members to join, right? We can't take advantage of the power of weak ties. It means we're probably not having access to a wider social network. If we're spending all of our time at Masonic events and doing Masonic things with all other Masons, then our social network kind of outside of that lodge structure breaks down, withers, and the fraternity stops growing as a whole. One of the things that we've seen over the last few years is Grand Lodges and the Northern Masonic jurisdiction using ads to target people and setting websites like beafreemason.org, where people can kind of request to join the fraternity. So what does that do for us as a fraternity? How does that impact our social network? We'll take a look at that on the second slide. But also through network analysis, if we actually run computational models here, we can actually look at the real issues of retention and that's impact on some of the schemes that we might have as far as ads or Ask One Be One or one-day classes and things like that. If we gain new access to new parts of a social network, but we keep our retention low, these are questions that we can computate and we can actually see computationally what kind of models or what kind of effects it'll have on our membership, right? And there are consequences for poor retention, in that it could potentially poison the well. And understanding that there's the rich get richer scheme, kind of just within the world. and systems. There's the inverse of that, the poor get poor, right? That if we are failing to gain membership or to improve our retention, those numbers are going to likely continue to drive in a vicious circle downward. So it's getting into that virtuous cycle and with the retention numbers and pulling it back. But network theory allows us to take a computational approach to this. We can also look at things like resiliency and robustness, that if we have a static hub, what kind of impact does that have on our structure, or when we close out key lodges or areas, what happens? I have not had a chance to run any of these models in a way that is useful for a presentation like this. There's a couple different network software packages out there. Some create better visuals than others, and a lot of them require a level of coding that I just don't have currently that I'm working on. We're going to take a look at the next slide. So here's an example of a lodge. This is the same graph with a few additional things on it from our first slide. Here you can see this might represent a family cluster. So father, son, his kids might join another lodge over here. This one will go over here. When we are performing things like ads and things like that, one of the things that can happen is that we can get somebody who's completely outside of our network, say this node right here, or say this one over here. So we have a couple different situations that can develop. One is that if the person comes to the lodge, has a terrible experience, isn't worth their time, they stop coming to lodge, right? Our retention number fails. They might poison their whole social network out here, right? So it's not just losing one person, right, and wasting lodge's time. You lose an additional 9 people for a total of 9 people quote lost in your potential ability for your lodge to grow. The other flip side of that is that this guy joins, he loves it, and he gets another 9 or 10 people to join. Here we're representing this as 4. Or he only has one person, and through the power of weak ties, we get another member over here, and then the network continues to grow further out this way. Or nobody else joins from him, and this is kind of what we see a lot, is that somebody will join the lodge, and for a number of various reasons, nobody else in their social circle is interested in joining. But the use of advertisement allows us to take to gain access to part of a social network that we don't have access to, compared to the traditional method of where somebody over here knows this guy, and so they join, and a couple of their friends further out join too. That's really all I have for today. Further research would actually be running the computational models using this. COVID was a thing, and I think most of us probably have seen the models where they would look at how the contagion models where people would get sick and things like that. Basically, we'd be running that in the same exact manner, except that it would be positive when somebody quote gets infected with Masonry rather than the inverse of getting disease. But these are things that we should be looking at when we're looking at the fraternity, and not making blind shots in the dark, not addressing our root cause problems, which really come down to retention and a lack of resiliency within the fraternity. And that for the most part, as a system, we've become pretty stagnant, and that the fact that most of our lodges operate the same way, have the same set of problems, tells us that there's a systemic issue there that should be addressed before we go out and look at trying to tap into parts of our social network that don't exist. For the most part, right? Because every lodge is different, and some lodges who do have, again, the rich get richer scheme, that are functioning very well and are getting membership through the traditional way, they're also a great place to introduce people to from your prospects from Grandview and things like that, or from Scottish Rite or your Grand Lodge prospecting system. Whereas lodges that are struggling kind of can poison the well for the community and lead to their own destruction. There's only so many people in a given area that are capable or willing to join a lodge. So for example, in Ohio, there's about just a little over 4 million men who are eligible to join the fraternity, meaning that they are old enough They believe in a higher power. The number gets smaller when you add in things like, no felons, um, and a willingness to actually join in time and money, and those sorts of factors. Those numbers start to dwindle pretty quickly. And that's something that we can actually look at and computate. This is our actual population of potential members, and we can actually run these computational models against that, saying, if our retention number stays around, I think 6% in Ohio, I actually think it's actually higher. I think we call it the lost 30 if those numbers are correct. I think from 1-day classes we can see that it's I think 6% retention, and where they go on to actually become an officer in lodge or something like that. You can use those numbers to see how quickly you're going to burn through your total population of people willing to join the fraternity as it stands. And that's something that we don't really look at as a group, is that runway we have. Sometimes we'll do it financially, and some lodges will understand that we have $9,000 left and we're spending $50,000 a year in our building. Like, we can't last terribly long. That runway, as far as our population goes, isn't something we look at. And additionally, when we look at the resiliency of the lodge, sorry, I got distracted there. We actually started looking at the number of people who can join the fraternity, and we're doing something like a 1-day class. We might be burning through our available population quicker than we can plan. And so, for example, there are companies like Amazon who are struggling to find workers in their warehouses because they know they're going to have a high churn rate. There are a lot of people who are not going to last very long, 3-6 months. And so, there's some areas where it's more rural and they just can't find new workers because they've already gone through the entire workforce and say that these people can't work here anymore for whatever reasons. This is a danger to the fraternity that we just aren't really looking at. If you're interested in finding out more about network theory, there are a couple of book suggestions and websites. The first one is linked: How Everything is Connected to Everything Else and What That Means for Business, Science, and Everyday Life by Alberto Laszlo Barrasi. Barrasi is a prominent academic in this field, and he's responsible for finding things like scale-free networks and things like that. Complexity: A Guided Tour by Melanie Mitchell. This is kind of a guidebook to complexity thinking in general, which network and graph theory is a big part of. Again, Complexity: The Emerging Science at the Edge of Order and Chaos by Michael Waldrop is another book like that, where it introduces a lot of these core ideas. Scale is a little bit more directed towards scaling up and also growth, innovation, sustainability. And it's by Joffrey West. This is a good book to understand. In business, people talk about scaling up and scaling, which has its own issues. You can read more about that blitz scaling, where a lot of tech companies just try to scale as fast as they can. That creates its own set of issues and problems. And this is a good book to understand the laws of growth and things that impact our social networks and the fraternity. And lastly, if you want to learn more about complexity and networks, Complexity Explored by the Santa Fe Institute is a great resource. There's a program that they have free lessons on called NetLogo, where you can actually run some of these computational models yourself. That's all I have for today. Do we have any questions?
I'm gonna go back to the gallery here for everybody. Thank you, Tanner. I enjoyed that. You definitely brought up some things. I kind of want to ask the question. So I realize you say you'd love to like crunch the numbers and you'd actually get more useful data specific to say your Grand Lodge, but like assuming you could do that and get real numbers to back up the ideas here, how do you in a practical way apply this sort of analysis in telling lodges what to do? What do you do with it? Does this mean like shutting down lodges or changing how we attract members? If you could wave a wand and say, okay, I've got these numbers, here's what the Grand Lodge needs to do because of what I've figured out.
So primary, it should be those computations would be a tool to look at certain policies, particularly regarding who we drive prospects to. Because the Grand Lodge of Ohio, we get prospects sent to us through the Scottish Rite, Not a Man in Mason campaign and stuff like that, and from their website. So there's a lot of people coming in through that process.
Mhm.
And two is whether or not we want to do 1-day classes, right? So I think, and I don't have the numbers right in front of me. I think originally when we did it, we had like 6,000 people go through 1-day classes, and went down to like 4 and 3, and then there was a very sharp drop off in the number of people going through 1-day classes. Um, it should be these analyses should be ways to guide our policies on whether or not we're going to do a 1-day class, which regardless of whether it's an appropriate way to join, and there's issues around that. There might be unintended consequences that we're completely blind to, and these hidden risks, right? And things we don't know about that. If we're running through our population of people who are eligible to join and want to join, and we're failing them and delivering a quality Masonic experience, it's a big risk. So it's trying to determine which lodges are, one, healthy, and two, what policies we have that might provide those larger risks. And ultimately, for what does this mean for lodges and how they should operate, it doesn't tell you a lot outside of the fact that, one, for the most part, we should get away from the lodge being the heart and soul of a person's entire social experience. So I'm pretty sure most people in this room have probably joined, at least 2 appendant bodies, right? If you're part of the Virginia Lodge of Research, you're probably, and you have your mother lodge, you're at least in 2 lodges right there. In our area, there's a new High 12 club that's trying to come together. We've got all kinds of Grotto, Shrine, York Rite, Scottish Rite, multiple lodges. I think Worship Brother Miller is even working on getting the 12 Series of Lebanon going in our area. And that's outside of all of the different kind of other Masonic groups, right? So Masonic ham radio clubs, the Western shooting clubs, the stamp collectors. There's even the Order of the Beaver, the Masonic reenactor group, right? There's all of these Masonic groups out there that can eat up our time, and that there's that joke where if you've seen the guys, he has got his truck, he's got like 70 different emblems on it, right? It's like, I haven't eaten dinner since like 1999. That's part of the problem, is that if our social networks are confined to other Masons, there's no space to grow, right? Become root bound. And so it's identifying that problem to people.
Okay, so you're saying basically that in order to attract more people into Masonry, we who are, assume everyone in this room is a strong, active, outgoing, popular Mason. We all have good teeth and everybody loves us. So we aren't attracting people because we're just hanging out with other Masons. We need to spend time in non-Masonic circles to attract other people into our group. If we only hang out with other Masons, we're not bringing anyone new in. That's kind of what you're saying.
To an extent, yes. That there is an opportunity cost to only going to Masonic events. And just understanding those opportunity costs, right? I have friends who I haven't seen in like a month or two because I keep going to Masonic events, or I'm trying to get stuff together for district party, and all these things. Like it takes time away from some of our other activities, and it's really more the power of, again, weak ties, that our relationship to the community and our ability to be effective in improving the lives of those around us, right? And that sense of charity that Masons supposed to embody requires us to have those kind of weak ties. It doesn't necessarily mean that we should have weaker ties internally, but we do need to kind of cultivate our relationship with people outside of us in that truly Masonic sense. And again, comes back to focusing always on what Masonry is about and what we're supposed to be doing. And that, I think, at least following those kind of approaches typically results in a healthier social network for everybody and the fraternity. And again, this is part of a series of ideas about Freemasonry as a system that will kind of feed back into each other, that we should be looking to develop Masonically and reintroduce some of the Masonic principles and ideas that have gotten weakened over time due to the way our administrative burden has shifted in the fraternity. And those consequences that we don't really always think about or understand terribly well. they have impacts we don't always see. And potentially even using some like network analysis might help us understand some of those costs.
Brother Dean mentioned Tim Wheatland. It's past Grandmaster. I assume that's from Ohio.
Yep.
He messaged me. I think he meant to message the whole group. So I'll ask you. Are you familiar with Brother Whelan, and what is he doing in this circle?
So most special Brother Wheeland, during his year as Grandmaster, during his rollout, he had some numbers. The numbers were a little hard for me to interpret. The way that he just graphed them was a little just odd from like a data analysis perspective. But his whole point was that we need to make new members, and that essentially the one-day class is an effective way to do that. And that if our fraternity operates more like a business and looks at our membership as customers and thinks about things in markets, we'll be better off as a fraternity. I disagree with that for a number of reasons. Primarily that a lot of these companies that are, a lot of them, the more modern marketing approaches are really more about kind of cultivating what we actually have already, which is kind of brand identity, identifying with their brand. So think of companies like Lululemon and stuff like that, and Apple. They have a target audience, Stanley Cups, Yeti. These brands have cultural identifiers that people use that kind of that are kind of become part of their identity, right? So, the active lifestyle, athleisure stuff with Lululemon and those clothing brands, it's very popular because people want to present themselves as being athletic and active and fit. There are other companies who do the same thing and have these cult followings with their marketing. And Freemasonry, a lot of stuff that they're doing and cultivating, spend a lot of money and time and hard work doing, has inherently in the way our fraternity is supposed to work. And the problem isn't that we don't operate like a business, it's that we don't operate like our fraternity anymore. And that's some of the business practices, right? Like our audits in Ohio, we have inspections. They're basically auditing your ritual and your paperwork, right? Making sure nobody's stealing money, you're documenting the right stuff, you're capable of putting on the degrees. Have taken a real large prominent role in Masonic culture. So inspections are people go there, they're big social events for the lodge. People get really worked up. It's kind of the key point in a lot of people's year as master. Not really what Freemasonry is supposed to be. And lodges that are healthy, that's not really the case. And lodges that are bringing people in that are functioning well, they're like, yeah, it's just another degree. It's not a big deal. We can do it, right? They tend to have a lot more fun at their inspections and have a lot more engagement afterwards. So the parking lot lodge where everybody goes out and talks afterward, those lodges tend to have that inherently. And an inspection is just another way to get that time in.
Interesting. I want to ask a question, Taylor, because in Virginia, we have what I'll call like weak pockets, weak areas within the state. So like, if you know Virginia at all, I'm in Tidewater, which is, Virginia Beach. I'm down in the southeast corner. My area of Hampton Roads, Tidewater, is probably one of the strongest in the state. We're very close to each other, and we have Scottish Rite that's very strong. We have Royal Arch Commandery, Shrine, and like 20 Blue Lodges on the south side. We're very active in Masonry, and a lot of us know each other. That networking you talk about. I thought of several people that you mentioned the strong, what'd you call
Strong
them?
ties and weak ties?
No. Where the individual person knows a whole lot of other people.
Oh, hubs.
Hubs, yeah. I think I know several people are hub. I think I consider myself a hub because I'm active on social media and all this. But you go somewhere and you see the at least some people everywhere you go that are at everything. And you're right, they make the connections. Well, anyway, this area in Richmond and Northern Virginia is where most of Masonry operates, and then there's other big pockets. But it's like if you go west of the mountains, they're hills, but like to call them mountains here. In the far west part of the state, you have huge areas where you might have 20, 30, 50 miles or more between lodges. And most of those lodges struggle, and they don't really have because they're kind of off the beaten path, the lodges kind of struggle and they kind of go on for years. Whereas here, it's like I could join at least 20 lodges that are within half an hour of my home easily. And attend, and if my lodge folded tomorrow, I could easily join another one right next door. So I'm asking, in Ohio, are there like areas where basically there's not a lot of Masonic activity, or you pretty much evenly spread throughout the whole state?
Oh no, we definitely have hot pockets. So Mike and I are from one. It's Cincinnati area, Dayton, the Toledo, Cleveland, and Columbus area typically are the hot areas. Youngstown and Sandusky, Ohio, are also pretty strong. So our eastern side tends to be more Appalachians, tends to be a little bit on the weaker side.
Okay.
And I think there are a couple factors that go into that. One, we have this idea that I don't think is accurate, is that lodges are supposed to be a certain size, membership wise.
Mhm.
So in Ohio, you
What
only
is
need
that
8
ideal
people.
size? Anybody ever tell you?
Yeah. And so I think sometimes we get hard on ourselves because there's this idea that you shouldn't recycle past masters. You should go through the line one step, 1 year at a time. I don't think that. I understand why that's the case, and a lodge that's really active makes sense to keep the people engaged. I do think we burn through our leadership though when we do something like that.
Yep.
Imagine your company having a new CEO every year is probably not a good sign, right?
Right.
That the
But
flip side of that is that
most people don't join a company expecting to be a senior vice president or the CEO. They accept that I'm going to be a worker bee. But yeah, in masonry these days, the assumption is everyone gets to be master, which kind of means it's like, well, everyone gets to do it. Is it really an honor if literally, this is our lodge, the 6 of us. Taylor just was initiated this year. I'm the master. Alan's the senior warden. Jason's junior warden. Okay, Taylor, you're gonna be junior deacon this next year, and you're gonna follow Paul, and you're gonna be master in 6 years or 5 years. It's automatic. Is it an honor if you have a pulse and we're gonna make you worshipful master within 5 years of you joining? Does it mean anything? Do you even take it seriously? It's like, oh, well, I got my 3 degrees and the next step is junior deacon and I got to learn this. That's just the natural thing, what everyone has to do. I mean, it kind of is kind of counterproductive in a way, because it's like, there's no great honor to be master of your lodge if you're so small and we run everybody through. Everyone gets to do it. It's just something I got to sit there. I don't even have to work at it. I get to be, you could think I get to be junior deacon without even earning it. Why should I put any effort? Okay, I'll go learn that part, I guess, to sit in the chair, but I'm not going to put anything into it because they're going to advance me no matter what I do. You know what I mean? It's almost like a government job. I get promoted whether I can do it or not.
And that's the thing, is that we're not selecting intentionally for stuff. And a lot of stuff in masonry has become just perfunctory, right? Like, this is just the form that you follow, right? You just get in the line, go through the chairs.
Yep.
Then people don't know what to do afterward because there's not a lot of content or meaning behind doing it that way.
Mm-hmm.
The other side is that, because I work with a lot of technical people, right? A lot of scientists, and they, as a group, hate being managers, right? Nobody wants to be a manager. And so when you tell them that, no, you have to be a manager, you have to manage these people, they're not happy about that. They get stressed out about that, And so we're putting people in positions that they don't really necessarily want to do. They're not qualified to do, and they don't want to do, and stresses them out. And this is why we have retention problems, right? And it becomes, again, one of those vicious circles where now people hop out of line, and you have to scramble. And it's harder to plan. It's harder to put on good events because you have the wrong people doing the wrong stuff. And, they get burned out. They get tired because nobody else is putting the work, and it just burns everybody out. Just as a model, just doesn't work terribly well.
Anybody, I want to make sure I open up the floor. Does anybody else have questions or comments about presentation today? I can always come up with stuff, but I want to make sure everybody else here gets a chance to comment. Is Mike Miller from your lodge or from your area? Do you?
Yeah, he's his lodge is like 5 miles from my lodge.
Okay, cool.
Work with him all the time.
Well, Mike, you're fairly new to me, but I think I've seen you before. I've probably seen you on Facebook or something. You want to say hi to everybody and maybe make a comment since you seem kind of new to the group?
Yeah, sure. So Mike Miller, I'm a past master of Jefferson Lodge in Middletown, Ohio.
Okay.
Also the senior warden for the Ohio Lodge of Research. So I've done a couple of the podcasts with David Dougherty. So if you've seen my face, that's probably where it's from. I do get around and travel quite a bit.
Dave's a regular attendee here. He's a good guy.
Yes.
He's going to be a speaker here one day.
I agree with a lot of what Taylor said. Actually, a lot of this has been a lot of our parking lot conversations over the years.
Right.
You guys have done a really good job with this presentation today. And one of the things too, you guys were kind of talking about the progressive line, so to say. I've got a little bit of a different perspective of that. Sometimes I think pushing guys into positions that they don't necessarily intend to be on kind of helps them with growth if it's done in the right manner. Maybe not always easy with a smaller lodge versus a bigger lodge. Kind of like Taylor was saying, his lodge is a little bit of a smaller lodge. Our lodge, when I first joined my lodge, we had roughly 500 guys. But I was also one of those guys who got plugged right in at senior deacon too, without knowing all the details of what it was I needed to do and needed to learn. A lot of my learning was on the fly.
And I have to, if I can interrupt you there, is like, I understand if your lodge is lucky to bring in like 1 or 2 new members a year and you only have about 10, 20 active members and most of those are past masters, you really have no choice. We got to put Taylor in line. We don't have anybody. In a lodge with 500 members, how many active members would you say you had at the time you were put in as senior deacon?
We would have an average attendance between 30 and 40.
Okay. And so how come you got picked ahead of all those other people?
I think a lot of it is because of returning my work long form in a traditional manner.
Okay. So you did stand out a bit. Okay.
But at the same time, though, I was kind of like you guys had mentioned, I was very overwhelmed, finding out that, inspection was a thing, that I could travel to other lodges, that I had more ritual work to learn. And so at that time, I had a 3-year-old and my wife was pregnant with twins. It was kind of one of those, I don't know that I want to continue and be junior warden. But everything that I read before I had joined, which not everybody also does their research, was that the number one way to watch your lodge die is to sit on the sidelines or not even come to lodge. So I said, well, I'll go to junior warden. And, I looked at the lines. I'm like, okay, there's not much more to learn. And then of course, after I, got put in the chair, then they're like, well, you need to learn a lecture.
Yeah.
And so I was like, well, after I did a lecture, well, there's not anything else that I can't do memorization wise, because the lecture is probably the longest thing. So, but I found growth in doing things that didn't make me comfortable. But to do that to someone else who maybe didn't have that same perspective, he could have been like, okay, well, I'm done with this. This isn't organized. I'm not doing this. And then you ruin that whole social network group that he has outside of the lodge, potentially as members.
Right.
So.
And to piggyback what you're saying, and I don't know if it came as clear through this presentation, as I usually hope, is that the way that we approach Freemasonry kind of as a whole for a long time was very form, right? This is what you should be doing. There should be a progressive line. Freemasonry is stronger when it's self-organized. By that, I mean, like the relationships and complex dynamic systems. Every person is an independent actor and they kind of adjust to each other. And when you allow that to happen, just like in the market, it tends to have more strength and be more resilient and robust. And that really we should be allowing people to have that level of organization where they organize it themselves. So like, it isn't that there's anything inherently wrong with a one-day class or the way that we do inspections or with progressive lines or anything like that. Is that when we as individual lodges operate perfunctorily and just following these forms without the intention, without understanding what we're doing, and not knowing any better, not being deliberate about it, is really detrimental, right? So there's all kinds of you know, just I'm not hearsay, but they're very common like platitudes where people say, you know, get them involved, right? And how
Cliches.
people, yeah, and it's that the fact of the matter is that, you know, this is art, not science, right? It's not, you know, follow this recipe and you'll have success. You know, we're creating something beautiful, right? That's one of our pillars as fraternity. It requires that level of thought and meticulous care and crafting those relationships and having those relationships not just be cookie cutter, you know, make this fit in this whole kind of stuff, you know, we have to have it kind of customized for each individual lodge and each individual person. And building those relationships that way intentionally is how we get those strong bonds. And it's when people are just treated like another, you know, body to fill a chair, that's when we have problems, right? When inspection is just what you do, right? Because you have to do it, or this is what we do in inspections, right? This is the way we've always done it. That is one of the core problems that we see, is that we've had these best practices that are poorly understood, poorly implemented, and maybe not fit for use in the area that we're looking at them. That drives a lot of dysfunction we have in fraternity.
Yeah, I would tend to agree that, yeah, it's like, if you don't know why you're doing it, you're just doing it because, what's the point? I did want to say, in Virginia, we have a warden certificate that you have to earn before you can be installed as master. And typically you earned it as junior warden, is we push people to do it. So that way you're a senior warden, you can relax and build, you know, plan your term, line up your speakers and all that stuff. But that's basically it. We do have ritual schools. We do have local district schools, and most lodges have their own school. We do have regional schools that are optional, but they encourage the officers to show up. But basically, the local districts will say, okay, here's who we're going to put in the chairs, and you basically can present all 3 degrees. That's useful. You're not being graded. No one comes to your lodge and tests the overall lodge's ritual. It's the guy who's going to be master has to be proficient in opening and closing the lodge, conferring the degrees, which is good, but he can do that at his own pace. I just got mine for the research lodge, which was a short form version of it. But basically, when you're junior warden, you go get your warden certificate and then you forget about it. You're doing the work. You don't get graded again, and the lodge as a whole doesn't get graded. So I can see where that's a lot of pressure with those inspections. If it's like make or break for the lodge, I don't know. But every Grand Lodge does it a little bit differently. So, you know, you do what you do, we do what we do. It's a little different. I did wanted to say, if you're watching us on YouTube, please like and subscribe. We just uploaded all the recent unstated meetings up to this point are all there on the YouTube channel. So if you're watching this, you're already on you're looking at the playlist. In 2 weeks, on the 24th, we're going to have Joe Martinez, who's a frequent flyer here. He's going to be giving a presentation. I just asked him today for what topic is so I can make sure I can promote that. But I wanted to thank Taylor for being here. We're wrapping up just under an hour, so that's great. I do appreciate it. It was a good topic. I think it kind of stimulates the thinking, and we need to have more discussions about how to keep our lodges going and how to be make our lodges better and not just settle for the cookie cutter. I think just we're intelligent men. We should be thinking about what works and what doesn't work and try different things instead of just settling for, well, we always did it this way. Otherwise we grow stagnant. So thank you. Anybody have any comments for a wrap up? Okay. Thank you all for coming out today, and I'll see you all again soon.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Everybody.